They came, they saw, they slaughtered. And as they decimated the planet of around 11% of its entire population, as many as 40 to 60 million people in Eurasia, they engaged in absolutely brutal warfare. This is what you get when you mess with us, was the message they left in their wake, walking away from mountains of skulls, from great piles of hacked-up bodies, where sometimes even the household pets were impaled. The Mongols weren't just unstoppable, they left the scariest calling cards in military history. Today we're going to focus on the greatest of all Mongolian warrior rulers, Genghis Khan, the man who brought together and unified the nomadic tribes of Mongolia. With him at the helm, the Mongol Empire became one of the greatest continental empires in history. Under Genghis Khan and his offspring, the Mongol tribes would embark on military campaigns that conquered lands far and wide, covering today's Russia, Ukraine, Hungary, Poland, Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, China, and Korea, going as far as Southeast Asia, Persia, Syria, Turkey, and India, and making a right bloody mess of Iraq. Genghis Khan was a brilliant military leader, but his resume certainly tells us there was much more to this man than brute force. He developed trading systems and communication systems, and despite the total lack of mercy he showed toward his enemies, he was somewhat tolerant of those who lived under him where their culture and religion were concerned. Nevertheless, the Khan's strategy for conquering much of the planet included what you might call the specter of fear. If bells began to ring in your town and people started whispering that the Mongols were coming, you feared the worst. You'd heard the talk. They didn't just conquer, they annihilated. The Mongols didn't take many prisoners, but at least they usually issued a warning. Submit to us or face our wrath. Take the knee and pay tribute, or we will unleash a hell on you that you couldn't have even anticipated in your worst nightmares. If war can be avoided, good. If not, so be it. We've warned you. That's us paraphrasing, but as you'll see now, it's what happened. The Pearls of the Orient. We'll start with one of the Mongols' lesser-known stories, a kind of subplot to the larger Mongol conquests. It's the story of the city of Termez in southern Uzbekistan. It was the summer of 1220. Two of Khan's generals, the ultra-formidable fighters and strategists Subutai and Jebe, were busy in Persia. Genghis Khan was resting his soldiers and animals somewhere in the mountains to the south of Samarkand, Uzbekistan. That autumn, he moved south with his army toward the city of Termez. As usual, the people of Termez had been given the option to surrender. They decided not to do that, with historians now saying they were mighty proud of their city's fortifications. Like so many other foes of the Mongols, they mistakenly believed they could fend off a siege. They managed to hold off the Khan and his soldiers for 2 days, after which the city was overrun. Genghis Khan ordered his soldiers to get hold of every man, woman, and child. They were told to count the citizens and send them out into an open field. Every soldier was then given the number of people he had to slaughter. This was a small city compared to some of the other cities we'll talk about today. Nonetheless, slaughter is slaughter. As they got to the end of the massacre and the groans and screams were fading, a woman was seen running away. She was soon caught, but before they killed her like the rest, she presented a bargain. She told them she had swallowed a large pearl and they could have it if they spared her. Instead, they disemboweled her on the spot, and lo and behold, she hadn't been lying about the pearl. In fact, she'd swallowed a whole bunch of pearls, which got the Khan thinking. There were pearls in this city, and other people might have had the same idea as this woman. So he ordered his soldiers to disembowel every last person and go through their insides looking for pearls or other jewels. Now let's dig a little bit deeper. Excuse the pun. The Battle of Kalka River. Many of you will have heard of the Ukrainian region of Donetsk Oblast because of the recent fighting that's happened there with Russia. But long before Vladimir Putin was sending soldiers there, the Mongols were doing damage on a much bigger scale, led by the generals we just mentioned, Jebe and Subutai. Both these men were campaign masters, having already led conquests all over Central Asia by the time they got to Ukraine. On this occasion, they were going up against a strong coalition of Rus principalities. The Rus were a people spanning part of Eastern Europe, originally Norsemen, who were woven into the historical fabric of what is today Russia, Ukraine, and Belarus. In this particular battle, it looked for a while as though the Rus armies were winning. They chased the Mongol hordes away. The Mongols, who were exceptional military strategists, were only retreating as part of a larger plan, spreading out their men and so spreading out the chasing armies. They stopped and got into battle formation at the Kalka River. It was the Cumans who got there first. These were nomadic people from the steppes of Central Asia. Alone against the Mongols, they were beaten with ease. Historians can't agree on how many men died. Neither do they agree on who had the larger army, but it seemed that the Rus outnumbered the Mongols, which was often the case. The Mongols were just better soldiers, faster and more skilled, while their generals were smart and usually had spies. We'll talk more about that soon. This Rus coalition was eventually defeated, but not before some of the princes of the Rus told the Mongols that they'd pull back their soldiers if they were guaranteed safety. The Mongols agreed, but they also lied. They soon took all the princes and leading nobles to be executed. But as the Mongols had a rule about not shedding the blood of nobles, they proceeded to execute these men in a unique and savage fashion. They erected a kind of scaffold and placed large pieces of wood on it. They then set up tables and chairs for a victory party. Only below the wood, propping it up, were the nobles. When the Mongols celebrated eating, drinking, and dancing, the nobles were slowly crushed to death below. This was supposedly a respectful death, but oh boy, it sounds slow and agonizing. In terms of victims, it was also a small-scale event for the Mongols. The deletion of the Khwarezmian Empire. A large land empire in history you might not have heard of was the Khwarezmian Empire, which covered much of present-day Central Asia, Afghanistan, and Iran. This was a powerful empire and one that really got on the wrong side of what turned out to be the more powerful Genghis Khan. In 1219, the Mongols went after the fortified town of Otrar in present-day Kazakhstan. The governor of Otrar, known as Inalchuk, was particularly disliked by Khan. Around a year earlier, the Mongolian caravan consisting of around 450 people plus a diplomat sent by the Khan had been massacred in Otrar. The Mongol caravan had brought with them gold and other luxury goods to exchange for the empire's famous Khwarezmian fabrics. Inalchuk murdered them all down to the last person. No one's really sure why he did this. Some historians say he thought that there were spies in the caravan, which, knowing the Mongols, there probably were. Maybe Inalchuk just wanted these Mongolian valuables, although that would be strange, as his city was a major trading hub on the Silk Road, and caravans passed through it all the time. Massacring traders was not good for business. Whatever the reason of the massacre, a camel driver survived and got word back to Khan. The Mongol leader was furious. Even so, at first he sent 2 Mongol diplomats and a Muslim diplomat to Khwarezmian Sultan Muhammad II, with the message explaining that he wanted Inalchuk to be punished. The Sultan was evidently not afraid of Khan. He subsequently had the Muslim diplomat beheaded, and he cut off the beard of the 2 other men, which was seen as very dis. This act had been known as one of the most consequential disses in world history. What happened next might be one of the biggest overreactions in history, but let's remember, this was more about the balance of power than the death of a few men. The Mongols under Genghis Khan soon besieged the city of Otrar, a siege that lasted 5 long months. It might have lasted much longer had a sub-commander for Otrar's army, a man named Koracha, not become a traitor and open the gates of the city. The Mongols piled in, slaughtering every single man, woman, and child. Koracha, who thought he was now on the good side of the Khan, went with his men to the Mongol side. They were all slaughtered too, with Genghis Khan saying you can never trust a traitor. As for Inalchuk, he barricaded himself in one of the city's inner citadels, where he was surrounded by the last of his army. He managed to keep the Mongols back for a month, but in the end the fight was hopeless. All this time the Khan had told his men, "Do not kill him, bring him to me alive." Even when Inalchuk was on top of a roof resorting to throwing tiles at the Khan's men, they made sure not to kill him. Inalchuk was eventually captured. To say Genghis Khan was upset would be an understatement. So the story about him executing Inalchuk by pouring molten silver in his mouth, eyes, and ears could well be true. Some historians doubt it, but that's what was written, and let's face it, Inalchuk was never going to get anything but a grisly death. The Khwarezmians had picked a fight with the wrong man. They knew very well what the Mongols were capable of, and the Sultan knew that killing the Khan's men meant war would follow. It's likely he knew a war was coming regardless, which is maybe why he did what he did. Now Otrar was out of the way, Genghis Khan proceeded to take out an entire empire. The Sultan was now on the run, occasionally listening to reports about how another of his great cities had fallen. The Khwarezmian Empire Part 2. Genghis Khan was intent on wiping this entire empire off the face of the earth, and we mean annihilating it to non-existence. The Mongols were known for their take-no-prisoner approach, but during the ensuing battles they did in fact sometimes take craftsmen and artisans and send them back to Mongolia as slaves. Genghis Khan also sometimes took young men and drafted them into his own armies. Such massive territorial expansion would have been hard without picking up more soldiers along the way. The Mongols captured the city of Bukhara, and then they marched to the capital city of Samarkand. Genghis Khan, something of a psyops expert, used his many spies to gain information about the infighting among the nobles of Samarkand. He then endeavored to start a fake news campaign, further creating more hostilities in the city. He wasn't just a good military strategist, he knew how to play the misinformation game. The strategy of divide and conquer was never far away from Genghis Khan's mind. But as you'll soon see, he made sure the same could not be done to him by ensuring his army would always be loyal to him. When he knew the city was weak, Genghis Khan, along with his sons, Shanghai and Ogade and about 10,000 men attacked. Here, the Khan made good use of some of the prisoners he'd already captured, moving forward with them as human shields. Not only do human bodies act as protection, but Genghis Khan understood very well how firing into your own men dampens the enemy's morale. To further douse the broken spirits of the enemy, he had his men catapult the heads of the captured enemy over the wall. But at one point, the Mongols retreated after what looked like a devastating counterattack. Yet again, the retreat was just a ruse to split the opposing army. The Mongols soon turned back, killing most of the opposition soldiers. In the citadel, the last of the city's nobles hid, surrounded by their top soldiers. As he would do time and again, Genghis Khan offered to spare everyone if they surrendered. "Come out," he said, "and you'll be all right," he said. "If you surrender, I'll spare you, and I'll spare the inhabitants of the city," he said. There was something like 100,000 citizens in the city, although again, historians will debate the actual numbers. Regardless, they surrendered to the Khan on the promise of safety. He then had every last soldier cut to shreds. As was normal, he got his own soldiers to round up the men, women, and children of the town and attempt to estimate the numbers. He then gave each soldier a quota he had to slaughter, and that was that. The next few hours consisted of massacring thousands and thousands of innocent people. This was, of course, quite unbelievably savage, but that was the point. This was psychological warfare. When other cities heard about this, surely they'd submit to the Mongols and pay tribute rather than fight back. As you'll see, this was not often the case. We should also talk about how the Mongols, often outnumbered, were so successful. They conscripted males as young as 14 and as old as 60. Each man received part of the bounty distributed by a kind of governing body called the Jarku. This meant that said soldiers would all take a slice of what they found: slaves, horses, cattle, textiles, precious metals, and food. If you served, there were many rewards. If you disobeyed orders or fell asleep on watch, the punishment was severe. Maybe lashes, maybe death. If you ran away or deserted, you'd be caught and put to death. But yes, there were significant rewards, which was great motivation for the soldiers. The Mongols were famed for being able to ride a horse and fire arrows quickly at greater distances than their enemies. They used wooden saddles with high fronts and backs, which enabled them to sit securely and take a shot. When they had whole populations of towns rounded up, as they did in the cities we've discussed, they used spears, axes, long knives, or curved swords 30 to 50 inches long to cut down the populations. Did the soldiers sometimes feel bad about the industrialized killing? It's hard to say, but since they were rewarded, and since their leaders had often given a city a chance to surrender first, maybe not. And anyway, the Mongols didn't invent mass killing, they were just good at it. As is always the case in war, Genghis Khan used propaganda to get his men to hate their enemy. Did Britain and the US feel bad about bombing Dresden? Not so much at the time. People criticized the US when it was discovered that it had secretly bombed the hell out of Laos and Cambodia, but a good few Americans believed their nation was liberating the world from those damned commies. It's well known that Genghis Khan and the Mongols were excellent purveyors of propaganda, whether serving to spread fear among the enemies or get their own troops fired up. The Siege of Urgench. The savagery continued when the Mongols besieged the city of Urgench, also part of the mass destruction of the Khwarezmian Empire. Genghis Khan's eldest son, Jochi, hit the city from the north, and his sons Chagatai and Ogedei came from the south. The invasion was made all the more difficult due to the area around the city being marshland. Moreover, there was a lack of large stones to catapult into the city. It's worth noting here that there was sibling rivalry between the brothers. Their dad was no spring chicken at this point, and he had to choose one of the sons to take his place. It was Ogedei who came out on top in this siege, and so was chosen to replace his father, but this would create a family feud. The siege of Urgench was one of the hardest for the Mongols when destroying the Khwarezmians, but with their catapults, their huge siege bows that could fire 20-foot arrows, and their battering rams, they eventually broke through. The Mongols also had gunpowder, something they'd discovered when invading China. To give you an idea of a typical arsenal for a Mongol siege, a historian wrote it consisted of 3,000 machines flinging heavy incendiary arrows, 300 catapults, 700 mangonels to discharge pots filled with naphtha, 4,000 storming ladders, and 2,500 sacks of earth for filling up moats. Naphtha, in case you didn't know, is a highly flammable liquid. Under this kind of attack, Urgench finally fell. A Persian scholar named Juvayni later wrote that 50,000 Mongol soldiers were each given the job of executing 24 Urgench citizens. That would mean executing 1.2 million people, which you can imagine would have taken a very long time. Juvayni was no doubt exaggerating, but modern historians don't disagree that the sacking of Urgench was one of the bloodiest massacres in world history. Again, the Mongols took artisans and other useful people, but the vast majority of regular citizens were executed on the spot. It's worth noting that prior to the systematic slaughter of the empire, Genghis Khan had written to the Sultan saying, "I am a master of the lands of the rising sun, while you rule those of the setting sun. Let us conclude a firm treaty of friendship and peace." As you know, the Sultan wasn't buying it, and as you'll soon see, perhaps he had good reason not to trust the Mongols. Massacre at Merv. The Mongols didn't always keep their word. When Genghis Khan's son Tolui went up against the city of Merv, the battle was a difficult one. On the 7th or maybe 8th day, the governor of the city sent a message to Tolui saying he'd surrender if the Mongols agreed to let his citizens live. Tolui said he'd agree, and on the next day, when the city was handed over, he proceeded to massacre pretty much every single person within the walls. The scene was worse in the city that fell next. Nightmare at Nishapur. As we said earlier, there was some exaggeration at times in the past when it came to the number of kills. For instance, it was written that the Mongols executed 1.748 million people in a single hour when they sieged Nishapur. This couldn't have been true, but that didn't mean the Mongols didn't murder almost the entire population of the city. The siege only lasted 3 days. But in that time, Tokuchar, a son-in-law of Genghis, was killed in action. This infuriated Tolui, who ordered every last man, woman, and child to be executed. He asked that Tokuchar's widow watch over this bloody spectacle. Tolui even told his soldiers to murder every single animal in town, including the cats and dogs. But seriously, that many executions in 1 hour would mean 29,133 lives per minute, which frankly was just impossible. There weren't even that many people to kill, far from it, but you can bet it was no exaggeration that the Mongols did slaughter most or all of the people in the city. The history books also tell us that Genghis Khan's widowed stepdaughter was afraid some people might have only been injured, so she asked for each person to be beheaded. She was granted her wish, and the heads and the skulls of each person were stacked in pyramids, something that was said to have taken a whole 10 days. We can't be sure exactly how many people were killed when the Mongols rubbed out the Khwarezmian Empire, but that is certainly what they did. So it's possible that 10 to 15 million Khwarezmians were slaughtered in all. That's incredible and horrifying all at the same time, given the tools they had at their disposal. The Mongols never did get their hands on the Sultan. He was still on the run when he passed away. Historians have said he could have died of shock as he watched an entire empire crumble before his eyes. The sacking of Kiev. You'll remember that the Mongols went westward at the Battle of the Kalka River. They returned to this region in 1240 when they sacked Kiev. They burned the entire city to the ground, and it's believed that they only spared about 2,000 people from the population of around 50,000. This was under Genghis's grandson, Butu Khan, son of Jochi. Genghis had died in 1227. An Italian diplomat named Giovanni da Pian del Carpine visited Kiev in 1246. What he wrote in his diary is one of the best descriptions of the devastation the Mongols caused. He wrote, "When we were journeying through that land, we came across countless skulls and bones of dead men lying about on the ground. Kiev had been a very large and thickly populated town, but now it was reduced to almost nothing, for there are at the present time scarce 200 houses here, and the inhabitants are kept in complete servitude." China. The Mongol armies were spread far and wide. Although with the kind of postal system they'd invented, they were able to stay in touch. This is one reason how they managed to become so formidable. The conquests in China went on for over 70 years, from 1205 to 1279, during which time the Mongols conquered various dynasties and kingdoms. Again, they engaged in what's called annihilative warfare, meaning they massacred most of the inhabitants of the cities they plundered and burned to the ground. The Mongols created their own dynasty in China under Kublai Khan and his Yuan dynasty. This would collapse and be replaced by the Ming dynasty, which would rule China from 1368 to 1644. The Hongwu Emperor, the founder of the Ming dynasty, executed thousands upon thousands of people he believed were plotting against him. This often consisted of slow slicing and flaying. He even ordered that any man found to have his hair in the typical Mongol style, the partially shaved style with bits of hair hanging out, be castrated. You can understand his fear. It's thought the Mongols killed around 30 million Chinese people over those 70-odd years from a population of around 120 million. It all started under Genghis, a man and his army who the Chinese didn't think had a chance of breaking through the country's fortifications, notably the Great Wall of China. Beating China was by no means easy, but Genghis knew it could be done, once writing, "I had trained my men to attack with the speed of the wind. Now they had to learn the guile of the wolf." They went from city to city, slaughtering everyone. As China was so divided, they employed Chinese armies and they employed Chinese weapons makers, men who had great scientific knowledge, which is probably how those weapons advancements got to Europe. When they couldn't get past a wall, they waited. starving the people in the city. The Mongol armies were well prepared for long campaigns. They set up camp outside cities, living in tents known as yurts. Each soldier was equipped with tools for cooking and sewing, a file to make arrowheads, and a leather food bag that could double as a flotation device. They had 2 bottles for water and other liquids, and each had a cooking pot. Their entire life could be lived on the road. This is how they crossed great swaths of territory, often riding 60 to 75 miles a day. If the soldiers' dry ration ran out, such as their meat, they'd even drink blood from their horse's neck. While not as civilized as some of the nations they defeated, they usually had the upper hand in a fight. Iraq. In 1258, the Mongols laid siege to the city of Baghdad, where again they slaughtered almost everyone. Baghdad was an advanced city of the age. The Mongolians burned down its libraries, destroyed important books on science, medicine, history, and philosophy. A modern historian described the carnage in a way we think is representative of how the Mongols worked. They swept through the city like hungry falcons attacking a flight of doves, or like raging wolves attacking sheep, with loose reins and shameless faces, murdering and spreading terror. Beds and cushions made of gold and encrusted with jewels were cut to pieces with knives and torn to shreds. Those hiding behind the veils of the great harem were dragged through the streets and the alleys, each of them becoming a plaything, as the population died at the hands of the invaders. The Mongols also kept the promise of not spilling noble blood. It's said instead of cutting down the Baghdad Caliph al-Mustasim, they rolled him up into a rug and trampled him to death. The Mongols were military technicians, amazing on horseback, masters of spying and spreading disinformation, helped by their development of a postal system, and without a doubt they understood how important psychological warfare was. They were great at what they did, wholesale murder. Genghis Khan thought his destiny was to rule the earth, something he didn't manage, of course, but he sure made a good go of it. He once said, "I am the punishment of God. If you had not committed great sins, God would not have inflicted a punishment such as me upon you." Now you need to watch Mongolian Death Worm. This is why you never want to come across it. Or have a look at Most Evil Man, Attila the Hun.